Greetings, friends and fellow travelers of life and all this majesty that we live in. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach and author of the book, A Life to Die For, which I really hope you'll pick up a copy of over in Amazon or wherever you like to do your shopping. In order to make sense of things in our physical reality, we are blessed with this thing called an ego mind that engages some pretty wonderful and powerful techniques. Things like logic, pattern matching, interpretation, for example, that help us to make what is fit more snugly into its model of the world. And the ego mind doesn't much like rebuilding its model of the world, so it goes through all these machinations and rationalizations and justifications and mental gymnastics, as it were, to fit a square peg into a round hole. And in other words, what the ego mind does is it tries to manipulate what is to fit its model of the world rather than just simply accepting what is in its current new state and creating a new model. That's part of the problem that we have to live with. And so the ego mind, which is ostensibly a tool for helping us to navigate the physical world and to keep us safe, applies its filtering to create a story around almost everything that happens in our world. So I've invited a special friend and colleague to discuss the concept of acceptance, which is a powerful tool for bringing the ego mind under control. Today's guest helps creative entrepreneurs craft an irresistible message and soul-aligned marketing plan through a journey of personal transformation that integrates their genius and shadow. She's a wild creation coach and soul storyteller, a writer, marketer, and certified master NLP coach and timeline therapy practitioner. She uses powerful questions, guided visualizations, energy clearings, and play, and a whole lot of other tools to manifest joyful creation in all of its form. She has a degree in creative writing and 20 years experience as entrepreneur, internet marketer, and a business coach. She's been featured on the Huffington Post, Fox Business News, and numerous publications on and offline. Please join me in welcoming the delightful and beautiful, wild, creative Stephanie Benedetto-Padovani to our show. Welcome, Stephanie. I'm so glad you could join me today. How are you?
I'm amazing. That's my answer for you. And all I heard.
Well, I already knew that, but how are you feeling?
I'm feeling amazing. I'm feeling amazing. I don't know what amazing is as a feeling, but if it is a feeling, that's me right now. And all I heard in that description of me, David, was you called me your special friend. And I was like, yes, I'm David's special friend. So thank you for having me here. And thank you for such a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate
you're most welcome. It's always a pleasure to share space with you. We've already had a lot of really cool conversations, and I wanted to have a one-on-one with you on this program to talk about something that's important to you. And I know that you and I talked about acceptance. We've talked about acceptance in many different forms in other venues, but I thought it would be such a great time or a great conversation to have with you. But before we get there, I just wanted to ask you, please tell us, what is a wild creation coach and what happened in your life to choose that would lead you to choose that as your path?
Oh my goodness. So I have chosen the label of wild creation coach to describe what I do because everything that I experience where I am most lit up in life is around joyful creation. And so that is what I do with people. Primarily, I'm doing that in the context of what we might call business coaching, but it's so much more far reaching than that. It's about, what brings you joy. And what happens when you pursue your joy, and what does it look like to create your joyful expression, your joyful creation in the world? Because I believe that when we do that, it overflows and the whole world is blessed with it. And this is my experience, and this is what I love to do.
Sure.
So that's kind of what that means to me. Many times that means that I am working with very purpose-driven entrepreneurs, many of them coaches, therapists, healers, or they certainly have a connection to purpose and the difference that they'd like to make in the world. And what we do together often involves clarifying their very powerful message that they have for the world that creates that change, and also finding ways of bringing that message to more people in a way that's very aligned and authentic, and creating a business that is a true joyful expression of what they'd like to bring into the world, not just fitting some template or the way things are supposed to be done or what other businesses are doing, but it's a unique expression of you and your voice and message. So that's really kind of it in a nutshell. That to me is wild creation. It's like no limits, nothing
Right.
is off limits. And it's very fun and playful.
Right. Well, here's what I have experienced with a lot of people who have been guests on this show. You talk a lot about joy and joyful creation, and I can tell, I mean, just by your presence, I sense that there's a lot of that within you. And I'm wondering if there was something that happened in your life that for some reason that got shut down or closed off, or if you were somehow disconnected from it at some point that caused you to realize how important it was and bring yourself back on that path. Is that resonating at all? Is there something like that that happened for you in your life?
Yes, absolutely. So, if I was going to tell a story, this is one story I could tell. Stories are
Sure.
also a big part of what I do.
Yeah.
And stories are constantly changing and evolving, our stories of the past as well as the story we're living into. So, this is one story I could tell in answer to that question. And that is that when I was a child, I think I saw things differently and I expressed them. And I was very, very joyful in a family where that was kind of threatening. I remember
Mm.
hearing, it struck me in a moment when I listened to Brene Brown on her Netflix special talking about joy terrifies us because immediately we start thinking it's going to go away. And I went, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Why my mother would perhaps not be able to receive my joy, because it came with this terrifying feeling of that's going to go away and I need to protect you and I need to protect myself. So I learned very young to try to be what other people wanted me to be,
Hmm.
to kind of make my voice and my being fit into the worlds of other people and conform, and got very good at it. Very good at being the A student and the teacher's pet, and doing things the right way and following the rules. And of course, at some point that began to became it, be, it began to become clear to me that that wasn't working for me, because something inside of me, there was something more I wanted to express and be that was getting squished. So really for years, even this started when I was in my teen years, but I've been continually growing into that and recognizing, and asking myself, what is my way of living? What is my way of being? What is my way of speaking? Who am I becoming? And discovering that as I live it. So it's not like there's some tablet in the sky that has all this stuff written on it. It's co-created in the moment with the universe, is how I experience
Right.
it. And
Hmm.
so it's led me to down some really interesting paths. I was in a very loving relationship and marriage. We were together for 22 years and married for 17. And yet I felt called to leave that, because it just felt to me our agreement was done in that way. And we're still friends,
Hmm.
still love him very much. And that was hard to come to. That was years in just coming to that allowance in my life, letting myself choose a path that was really mine. So I've had numerous times where I've looked at my life and gone, is this my life? Like, is this me? How did I get here? I didn't choose this. Now, of course I did, but my life now is lived so differently, and I'm still in that exploration where I don't have a plan. I don't have a set of rules that I'm following. I am following what I know, my intuition, my inner wisdom, which changes moment to moment. So I like living that way. I'm finding it to be a way to really flow with the creative energy of the universe. And it's also challenging because my mind, you're talking about the ego mind, really wants to figure everything out and is so brilliant at making connections between all of these things and creating a story about why this is happening. But the truth is, it's just happening. And the things I'm telling myself are just a story about it. So did that get deep enough? Do you want to go deeper, David? Because I'm so happy to. That's just what came to me in answer.
Oh, believe me, we'll get plenty deep. I'm not worried about
good.
But what I wanted to do is I just wanted to summarize a little bit, because I heard some points that I have heard many times before. I think that all of us go through childhood and we are told to behave a certain way. We are told to think a certain way. We're told what to believe, what kind of religion to have. All of these things are given to us from the moment we are physically brought into this world. It happens to every human being, I think, on the planet. Now, the thing is, this may seem like it's a deliberate plan to shut us down. And I know that maybe some people think that's the way it is. And surely some people go through a great deal of trauma in their life. Stuff that I certainly haven't gone through. And by the sound of it, I don't think you've gone through a lot of major trauma either. But the point is, it doesn't matter whether we get traumatized or not. The point is that our brains get molded, I guess, into a specific shape. All the thoughts that we have are given to us in the early stages. And it's not until we get into our adulthood that we're able to see that, wow, I really can think for myself if I want to. But by then, some of the conditioning is already pretty locked in, and it's hard to break that. That's what I am hearing here. And I think all of us go through that experience. And so I want to honor you for having the courage to make a decision in your life that other people might have thought was stupid or crazy or ridiculous or what the hell are you doing kind of stuff. But you were following the truth of your own essence and who you really are. And that's something that I honor because I think it's a very, very, very important and valuable characteristic. Something that all of us could learn to do, I think, in a better way. So thank you for that. Was that deep enough for you?
No.
No?
I was kidding. So, yeah, it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I find that I call them client playmates who I work with because they're not just clients. You know, we really play and create together. We're creationship partners. That so often
I like that. Creationship. That's a nice word. I like
that. Yeah. They come to me with this idea of, they're like, my business doesn't fit. My life doesn't fit. I don't know what else does, but this doesn't feel right. What is my way? And they think, in some part, at least it seems true, that it's supposed to look a certain way. And a lot of times, because I'm working with very purpose-driven, heartfelt, heart-centered entrepreneurs and individuals, there's a sense of obligation that they take on with that. And so what we explore is, what if you drop the obligation and create from your joy, recognizing that that is your greatest gift to the world? And what if you really allow yourself to explore what is your way of doing this, and you throw out the rule book and you throw out all the things that they say you're supposed to do that just don't feel right. And instead, you give yourself permission to experiment. We can always go back. Like, let it be safe and joyful. Let it be easy and slow if you'd like. It can be so much easier. I don't believe it has to be painful. And that's not dismissing the shadow sides of our existence. It's actually including them.
Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's something I'm really passionate about, in particular in business, but in all forms of creation in this world.
Right. It's beautiful. Well, I'm going to steal that word creationship. That was in my vocabulary. You cannot take it back. You gave it to me.
I didn't make it
I
up.
I accept it willingly. And speaking of acceptance, that's really what we're here to talk about today. And it sounds to me like a big part of acceptance in your work is to help people become more accepting of who they really are, and their way of being and their way of showing up and their way of doing things. I think that is a beautiful way of describing self-acceptance. But I think acceptance takes a broader picture and applies to pretty much everything in our world. And you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago when you said things are just happening and everything else is just my story about it. And I totally agree with that. I think that there is what is, and then there's the interpretation of what is. And every single human being on the planet has a different interpretation of what is. But what is hasn't changed. It's the same for everybody. So this is a beautiful place to start. And I think one of the things that I like to use, I have this little very short, easy to remember kind of definition, if you like, for acceptance. I call it awareness without agenda. So let's just kind of explore that a little bit. Tell me how you feel about that.
As a definition of acceptance, awareness without agenda. There's so much that can happen around that, right? So I like that. I like it because I think it speaks to actually what I believe is our natural state, where we
Yeah,
are living most of the time when we're not stuck in our thinking and judgments.
correct.
So when I wake up in the morning and I'm just doing what occurs to me to do, I get up, take care of any of my bodily needs, get something to drink, I stretch. I don't think about those things. I don't have a lot of judgments. I don't have an agenda in them until I start thinking about it. And in those moments, it seems to me that I'm in that state of accepting what is, what's occurring to me in my body, what's happening in my environment. And then something comes along that I don't like, and I would have a judgment or agenda about it, like, oh, I got up late, or it's later than I thought. I have to rush now to make my conversation with David, for example. And oh my goodness, do I have enough time? And then I start struggling against what's happening in my reality. And I have an agenda that it should be different than what it is. And that can create some suffering for me. But when I become aware of it, and just becoming aware of it creates some space, I'm no longer wrestling with it in the same way, and I immediately feel a little more, "Oh, I'm here." Well, I can sit and think about how I should have gotten up earlier, or I should have allowed more time, or I can just be where I am and do what I know to do right now.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about the thoughts and the stories that come up. And I mean, it happens instantly. It really, one of the ways I like to describe this is if, you just go outside and just decide to stop what you're doing and just look at the clouds. Your intention is to simply observe the clouds. How long can you look at the clouds and simply observe before you start noticing patterns? Before you start seeing a face or a bunny rabbit or a spaceship or something else in the pattern in the clouds. And then maybe if you're with somebody else, you can say, hey, can you see that thing up there in the clouds? And before you know it, you're having a competition about who can see what in the clouds. What happened to the idea of just simply observing the clouds has turned into something completely different. And this is the challenge that we have to deal with every single moment. If you want to be in a place of acceptance, you have to be aware of those thoughts. And then you have to let them pass, just like clouds in the sky, in order to stay present to what is. This is the nature of acceptance, I think. It is what it is. Yeah. I can't really do anything about it or make any change to it unless I completely and openly and willingly accept it as it is. Once I've done that, now I can move to the next step and start deciding how I want to be in relationship to what is. What do I want to do with it? Do I want to make a change to it? Is there something about it that it's teaching me something new about myself? All these things can now start to come into play, but not until you accept it for what it is. And that's the beauty of acceptance.
As I'm listening to you talk, David, there were a few things that were occurring to me, and I'll share them. And one was, I just want to ask this as a question for you and for myself and for anyone who's listening. What can we see about acceptance that's new today? Something maybe we haven't seen or noticed before. And I just like asking questions like that because I don't have an answer for it, but it allows me to live and create space for that to come in. So the other thing that occurred to me was that when we talk about acceptance, a lot of these things, it's like, what do I do? How do I do acceptance? And my experience of it first is like kind of noticing where I notice not accepting, or we might call resistance to what is, right? Resistance to anything. Just
Resistance or
noticing,
rejection. Yeah.
yes, right. Like
Hmm.
pushing that away or
Hmm.
engaging with it overly, which is also not accepting. Interesting. When we're holding on to something, it's not accepting either because the
Well, you're
nature of
resisting
things
something else.
is to move. Well, yeah, I'm resisting it leaving, right?
Hmm.
Like no, I want to hold on to this. As so my mind wants to think, okay, well, I'll do acceptance then. Teach me how to do acceptance. And as I've been contemplating this, it seems like more of our natural state that we're doing when I'm not thinking about it. Right. So as soon as I start thinking about it, now I'm trying to do it or not, or recognize that I'm not doing it. And it's like it feels hard. So
Right.
to me, acceptance is more like, let me see, I'll take you off of full screen here. Like, all right, how do I accept this pen? Like right now, if I'm trying to get like, what does that mean? How do I accept it? There's nothing to do. It's more like let's just say if I accept this pen, I'm going to stop holding on to it. It's going to do what it does when I let go of it, right? So there's nothing really for me to do. When I do nothing, that's when I'm accepting. It's not a doing.
That
It's
was,
it's
yeah.
like
I was going to say I've never had, okay, so you asked, what can we learn about acceptance that's new? And that's a beautiful segue because I've never thought of doing acceptance. That's a beautiful thing. It reminds me, oh, so what you're saying really is that acceptance is not really a transitive verb. Rather, it's just a simple state, a state of being present to what is. Not so much reaching out and grabbing something. That's not the same as acceptance, I don't think. Although, when someone gives me something, then part of the transaction is for me to receive it. In that case, receiving is not quite the same as accepting. So
mm,
I think I know where you're coming from on this, and I resonate with it.
that's good because I don't. I am so in discovery around this constantly and recognizing that just when I think I've accepted something, when I get this idea of acceptance, I go, oh, but what about here? I
Yeah.
haven't, what about there? Oh, and the more I do that, the more I see of it, the more it seems to me that I am already, it's like the only places I notice it is where I'm not. The whole rest of the time, which is
So
most
what
of
you're
my
saying is
experience, I am.
you notice the opposite of acceptance before you notice acceptance. Is that what I'm hearing? Or maybe
Because
not the opposite, or something that in your mind is not acceptance.
yeah. I've shared this story with you before, and I find it really useful to revisit because I keep having it over and over in different ways. So I
Hmm.
spent 30 days contemplating acceptance and just making a little video about them every day, what I was seeing, and asking questions as I do. And there was one day when I was started experimenting with this idea of self-love as a way to accept myself. And I'm looking in the mirror, which is a suggestion that someone gave me on Facebook. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I don't accept myself. I don't love myself. I don't feel that. Maybe I never have. I've never accepted myself. And I was devastated. I was like, my heart just sank. Okay, I got to make my video today about this. I don't accept myself and I'm just going to be real about it and I'm just going to talk about it. So I got my phone to make my video and I have it in my hand and I'm about to make this video. And in that moment, it occurs to me that, oh, of course, I don't accept myself in this moment because I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about what I'm accepting and not accepting, and I'm stuck in this thing of judgment. And of course, I'm not. But the whole rest of the time, when I'm not thinking, I actually am in the moment, present, being with what is. that is accepting. It isn't something we do. It's not even a state. It's
Right.
just what is when we're not screwing with it. When we're not like trying to figure things out and like make these connections and make something different be in existence that it isn't. And we're not telling stories about it. And I was like laughing. Yes, I was laughing at myself in that moment. And that's what I made the video about instead. It was almost real time seeing something new. And since I've seen that, I keep catching myself in it again and again. In those moments where like, oh, I don't accept this. I have to, oh, there's nothing to do. Oh, I don't accept this. Oh, that's right. I just
Yeah.
have to like stop. It's like releasing tension, but it's not even something I do in releasing tension. And it's, I, is this making some kind of sense? Because it's sometimes hard for me to
Oh, of
talk about it,
course.
and I hope you can
Well,
feel it.
it makes sense to me. I mean, I've been there. I've had a very similar series of experiences,
Hmm.
and I think what you're describing, although you're not using these words, not describing, demonstrating the challenge that we all go through between dealing with our spiritual nature and dealing with our physical nature simultaneously. They bump up against one another. And so the brain really and the mind that goes with it are part of our physical nature. We tend to think about things in terms of our physical being on this planet. When we are able to go beyond that and connect back into our spiritual nature, all of that stuff seems to fade away into the darkness. So we're constantly going back and forth, and it's a difficult transition that happens. And I think in your own way, that's what you were experiencing, and the words that you'd use to describe it seem to be consistent with my observation. Now, I may be completely wrong, but that's what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I'm pointing that out. And I think everybody goes through that challenge. You know, we live in a physical world or we're having this physical experience, right? But we are truly spiritual beings. And sometimes we forget about our spiritual nature while we're caught up in the whole physical aspect of our life.
David, this is what occurs to me as you're saying this, because yes, I absolutely have had that experience of this physical, spiritual, this pull, this vacillation back and forth.
Right.
And the question that comes up for me is, what if I could really allow or accept for the experience of both to be equally valid and happening at the same time, so that I didn't have to ping pong or choose between. I didn't have to prioritize the spiritual over the physical, because truly they're parts of the same experience moving through me.
Exactly. That is a key awareness. They are not two different things. It's just that they seem like two different things. And this is how our physical minds try to make sense of it. That's all. But you're absolutely right. They're the same thing happening at the same time and just showing up in slightly different ways. That's really all it is. It's like we're listening to this band of frequencies on the radio that are just coming at us. But we only have our dial tuned to a particular frequency. So that's all we hear. The moment you turn the dial, a new frequency comes in. So it appears as if there are multiple frequencies on the band, but they're all happening simultaneously. This is the thing that I love that you said that. Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. And I'm really like asking myself, what if I really got that? Like, I get that conceptually, but it still looks real to me that I'm in this battle between my body and my spirit. And that's cool too, for me to just notice that, like, okay, it still looks real to me, because then I can see something new, maybe at some point. And I will. I know that I will. David, is it okay if I ask a question of our listeners in this moment? So I'm just kind of wondering, like, what are you hearing in this? Is there a question that comes up if you'd like to ask one? Is there something that resonates? Like, oh, wow, is there something you're taking from this? Is this gobbledygook, which is also perfectly okay. I welcome all experiences that you might be having in this moment. If you'd like to share, I would love that if you're able. So I'll just toss that out there. Like what do you see about acceptance in this moment? And what maybe you're seeing something new that you haven't seen before. I would love to know.
Right. Well, I think that we've already hit on some really, really good stuff here. There's some great ideas coming forth. Of course, they're always there. It's just that we tuned our frequencies a little differently today,
Mm.
and I like that. It's wonderful. Um, so you have asked the question, and I'm gonna re-ask it. What does it mean, if it has any meaning whatsoever? What does it mean to be in a state of acceptance?
Mm.
I mean, if I don't even like to use the word meaning, because meaning implies mind has to think about it and all that kind of stuff. But it's a valid question. If I am in a state of acceptance, how do I distinguish that, say, from other attitudes that I might have? What's the difference between acceptance and, I don't know, just simply observing something and making some judgments about it? What's
Mm.
what's the difference?
This is the experience of it to me in this moment when I am in acceptance. And when I'm in acceptance, it's when I've dropped my thinking that anything should be different than what it is. So it's like I don't have thinking that this isn't right, this shouldn't be happening. I want something different. It's taking too long. I'm not doing a good job. I'm not showing up the way that I should. I've dropped all of that and I'm just kind of in it. Now that doesn't mean that I'm happy necessarily. That doesn't mean that I like or enjoy what's happening. I'm just not. And I might even have those thoughts kind of going through, but I'm just not playing with them. It's like I might notice that, like, oh, there goes a thought that I don't like this and this should change and I want to do something different, right? But I'm just not taking it so seriously. I'm not getting stuck in it. And it's I'm very, very present. I'm present without a lot of that, what you were talking about as agenda or judgments going on. They still might be there, but I'm just not holding on to them.
Yeah,
That's what I experience.
right. Sarah says that when she is in acceptance, nothing phases her. When she's in her mind, things can affect her. This, I think, is a valid observation. It certainly has been true in my life. Have you experienced that too?
Mm, nothing phases me. I'm wondering, like I just ask myself, what does that mean to me? Nothing phases me. Like I'm not affected. I think sometimes when I have an experience of acceptance, I still notice that I'm affected by things. It's I just don't fight it. So like for example, sickness is a good example. Now I've been very blessed to be very well throughout almost all of my life. And I'm not necessarily a very patient sick person. So in those rare moments when I do have sickness or illness, it's so foreign to me that it's like, blah, what is this, right? And there's a way of being when I'm sick that's not an acceptance, which is like, I don't like this. I want my throat to stop feeling like this, or I want to stop coughing and I want my body to just do something different. And why won't it? Right. And then there's a
Okay,
way
so
of,
before you go any further, wouldn't a state of acceptance welcome all of those thoughts as well?
would it welcome them? I don't know. Does it welcome them? It's not like, yay.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say
I
that.
welcome it.
This
Would
is
it?
this is
I
happening.
don't
I
know.
welcome it. I accept it. It's here.
Yeah. A state of,
And even if you have the thought, I want to change this, I don't like this at all, can you simply accept that?
yes.
Accept it.
Yes, yes, yes. So that's what I mean by when I'm thinking like, does nothing phase me? So here I've also had this experience when I'm sick that I give in. That's the surrender part. Like I
Mm.
just go, okay, I'm just gonna stop trying to make this different than it is because this is just what it is. And there's a relaxation in that. And it still affects me. So, like, for example, I might still feel dizzy or weak, or I might still feel the influence of whatever experiences I'm having in that moment of having a cold or a flu or whatever it is. Um, but I'm just not, there's not additional stress around it. Like, so it can, I'm still, sometimes I'm still experiencing what's happening in my body, sensations and things in my environment. I'm just not adding extra crap to it, which makes it a whole lot easier for me to find my way through the crap, to navigate through and go, oh, it would be really helpful for me to sleep right now. Or I would really love like a heating pad that would feel really good to my body. Or I need more blankets because I'm cold. Or, I need to drink some warm tea. It makes it easier for me to know those things when I'm not tight with. That's how I recognize acceptance. I think in a way it's like, is there contraction in my mind and body, or is there like, when I'm present, the contraction releases and I'm much more here.
So acceptance then, in a way, equates to relaxation, whereas non-acceptance equates more to tension. And
except this is a way words I'm using to describe it. Acceptance may include, my body is really tense right now. So in fact, that's a really great place to start with the idea, or experimenting for yourself what acceptance might be. Like, because a lot of times I'll notice first what I'm not accepting, which is like my shoulders tight. My shoulders are up here, right? Like, okay, well, what if I just allow or accept that? I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to relax it even. I'm just like, I like to think of it as creating space. This is something that I actually do with clients when I notice that there's a tightness, but it's resistance. I don't like to go into the resistance. Instead, I'll just like say, okay, let's just be with it. Like, okay, yeah, like, because that's one way. And there are some coaches who will do that and confront it head on. And that's just their approach. For me, it's more like, okay, let me just connect and be with. And I say, let's imagine some space around this. It's very somatic. Like if you've ever done somatic therapy or body work, it's very, very gentle. It's like acknowledging and honoring the experience that's happening and giving that space. And I find that when we do that, acceptance, again, because I do believe it is our natural state, starts to happen on its own. It's not something we have to do, because it's something we are when we're in our most present natural state. And so just the way we remind ourselves is just to come back to it. So that to me is what all these things that create tension and stress and suffering in our lives are, just reminders to do that. Like, okay, well, what if I'm here? What if I'm here and give space to all the things that are here with me without having to change it or do anything? What's that like? And then that's how we find it. It's not a doing. It's just coming back to what we are.
It's a being. It's not so much a doing as a being, right? Being present, being who you are with what is. And, you described a few results that can happen. And one of them, you didn't use this word, but as you open up the space for acceptance to come in, the resistance seems to go away on its own, and consequently relaxation comes in and takes its place. This is just kind of a naturally occurring thing. It just happens automatically. Now, when that relaxation comes in, guess what? Stress is going to start to melt away. And when stress melts away, then you're going to have the physiological benefits of reduced cortisol, increased oxytocin, or whatever that stuff is that's supposed to be good for you. All these other things are going to happen just because you've allowed the mind to quiet down and you've allowed yourself to become more present to what is, more in flow, if you like, with what is, rather than, trying to fight anything. So those are some of the benefits. What other benefits do you know about from the concept or from falling into acceptance? And we're going to get into the surrender piece later, but
Cool. I trust you. You are my guide here. You are my life mastery coach today, David, and every day.
Yes. Great, thank you. Oh, that touches me.
I really mean that, and yeah. I'm enjoying it. So, yes, there are physical benefits. There are. So, what I think, this is how it seems to me. What happens when we we experience this thing we're calling acceptance is that what's natural to us begins to occur. So our bodies create the hormones and the chemicals and the things that move us from a sympathetic nervous system state where we're in fight or flight to the present moment where we're in a parasympathetic state and we're more relaxed and open. So we can learn better. We can see new things. We can deal with whatever problems we may have in the moment. We can hear our inner wisdom more clearly because we're not stuck in all the static of the thinking and feeling that we were in.
Right.
And this is where I really love this. Right? This is where, for me personally, I'm like, yes, please, let's do this. Right? I'm singing. I'm that excited. It's orgasmic singing, David. Just so you know.
I can tell.
So, and this is often what I'm creating with people is that we need to find together this place of being present where acceptance just naturally happens, because a lot of times they're coming to me with like, oh God, all these stories and all this tension and all this anxiety and like, right? We can't create anything there. What we create is more of that. We create more stories and more thinking and more tension and more anxiety. So first we come into this, we just create that space. And immediately everything feels better. Everything gets easier for no reason at all when we become present, because that's the natural place of acceptance that we're always resting in, that we find. Right. And then from there, the creation that can happen. Like, now what game would you like to play? What business would you like to create? How would you like to possibly shift? Like we can start to shift from the stories of non-acceptance when we accept is like, here's what I've got in my life. Here's all the stuff happening. What would I like to do with it? And it becomes we can call it empowering, creative, inspiring. Now hope can come in, and there's something different we can choose now. So it's a place that's very, very creative.
Yeah, this is really important because, first of all, one thing we didn't mention earlier on, but I maybe just like to say this, is that just because you accept something, it doesn't mean you necessarily agree with it or that you condone it in any way or that you support it in terms of, whatever. So if there's something going on in the world that you find a little distasteful, okay, that's fine, but you can still accept it as what is right now. And as long as you allow yourself to get into that state of acceptance about what is, then you can allow that creative space to start opening up, which may give you some beautiful, loving, creative ways of solving a problem that maybe you hadn't thought of before. When you're in that fight place, when your mind is active and you're rejecting the thing you don't like, now you're simply arguing with it. And when you simply argue with it, you're adding more energy to it and giving it more power to stay present. But when you get to that place of acceptance, now you can bring unconditional love, compassion, and other energies to help heal whatever might need to be healed without forcing it or without in any way resisting what is. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think that, so just to give you I'll toss out a few ways that sometimes it occurs to me to do this. So I'm very playful. And
no, I would never have guessed that.
So anything that makes things into a play or a game immediately lights it up. So I might say, what's really funny about this? That I'm like struggling, I'm rejecting this, I'm struggling with this, I'm not accepting this. How is this funny? What if I loved this thing? And I'll go like, whoa, this thing that repulses me. What if I loved it? What if I loved the fact that like, okay, I've got these like little wrinkles here on the sides of them. What if I love them? And I actually love them. And I don't have to love them, but just asking that question, like opens something up in my world. What if this person who drives me nuts and every time I'm around them, I just want to, what if I really fell in love with them? What would that be like? Or like, what if I like say, what if I was willing to have more of that thing? So these are like kind of provocative questions that not everyone may find useful, and I wouldn't just blindly recommend them. But if something if it occurs to you at some point, like maybe I ought to try that one. What if I embrace this? What if I went with it? What do I love about it? What do I love about hating it? What do I love about rejecting it? And just notice those things. It can shift it in that moment. And now I'm already just more okay with it. I'm allowing myself to have whatever experience of hating it I might have. And that brings me into the present. And it just something else like naturally will occur to you. And I trust that place. I don't know how it looks every time. It looks different. It feels different every time. But I know that when I approach it that way, something moves and it shifts. I see something new. I have this great trust. And when I first that was not my experience in the beginning. In the beginning, it was awkward and hard, and it felt like a really difficult thing to do. And
You
it can
hated
often,
it.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
like, but that's why it can be so helpful to have someone, like yourself as a coach to see those things and to be with, like, you can be with me in that place and help me to see the things that I might otherwise miss.
Sure.
While it's something new, it's a new way of being. It's a new like, oh God, in your brain, of course, your mind will want to go the way things always have gone. Will expect it to go that way. Is going to make the same connections and go down those same well-worn neural pathways, to use that metaphor. So that's normal. And so it's helpful to have someone who can be with you in it and go, oh, but what about that path? Oh, but what if this? And oh, could you just... And also, it's okay, completely, 100% okay, whatever experience you're having. It doesn't need to look a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. I love this idea of opening up and asking questions. And I mean, as you were talking about what's funny about this, the idea popped into my head. I mean, I'm sure we all have, everyone has a favorite comedian. One of my favorites is George Carlin. And I can just imagine myself asking, what would George Carlin say about this? And then I start laughing because I just remember him and the stuff that, and maybe George Carlin isn't your favorite. Maybe somebody else is more in line with who you like. But I'm just saying that would be a great exercise. How would George Carlin talk about this topic? Or how would what's his name? No, I can't even think of anybody else. So never mind. But you understand what I'm saying. And in a similar way, maybe, we have this phrase, what would Jesus do? Well, okay, let's not get into the religious realm right now, but maybe you have someone else in your life that you really love. Now, maybe I could ask, what would Stephanie do in this situation? How would Stephanie challenge me to look at this differently? So it doesn't have to be someone who's, been world famous or anything like that. Not that you're not world famous. Are you saying
I'm not world famous? Come on.
I'm sure that there's a world somewhere that knows all about you.
There's a whole universe where I'm like the queen, David.
There you go. Exactly. And I accept that. So it's a beautiful thing. And I love this idea of simply just trying to bring different perspectives. Imagining other people in your life, how would they respond to this situation? And even if their response, you choose someone maybe who you think is not quite so enlightened or whatever, and you think, oh, he'd probably get all upset and do this and that. And now you can ask yourself, could I accept that too? Could I be okay with that? Even if I completely disagree with what he said, what would Alex Jones say about this? And that might trigger all kinds of thoughts coming up. Fine, let the thoughts come up and just simply be with them. Because maybe one of those questions and one of those weird ideas that we just had will trigger an awareness that you never had before. And get you even deeper into connection with who you really are. And that's ultimately what we're all here to do, I think.
That's beautiful. I like that, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I guess there's probably a world somewhere where I'm the boss too.
Isn't there? Is there a world where you are? I'm not the boss. I'm just the queen. And I don't know how it happened, but they... I didn't ask for it. It's just the way things are,
Sure, sure. And it's true for everybody who's watching this. It's true for, I mean, we all have a place. You know, when they, I mean, even the Bible talks about the kingdom of heaven being within.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, what does that really mean, huh? It means we have a place of our own that's for us. And it's there. We all have access to it. And we can only gain a bit of a glimpse of it when we let the ego mind quiet down enough so that we can be fully present with what is right now.
Mm. I really felt that when you said that, David, like, a kingdom of our own. And, within it, and I think another way to put it is like the lotus of your heart, like the lotus blossom, the sacred space. Just invoking that as an image is really powerful. It's
Yeah,
a sacred place where and there's a sovereignty about it, but it's not about ruling over others. It's just about being ourselves and
exactly.
embodying our fullness.
Yep. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, okay, now it's time to get to the meaty part of this thing. First of all, the title of this episode is Surrender into Acceptance. And I know that there's lots of people out there who are triggered by the word surrender because it implies giving up or giving in or capitulating, which is not at all what we mean by that word. So, Stephanie, I'm going to hand it over to you now. I want you to talk a little bit about what surrender means to you, especially in the context of acceptance.
Hmm. So I think it was about 4 or possibly even 5 years ago, I read this book by Michael Singer called The Surrender Experiment, which in which he tells the story of his life. Um, at a certain point, he was just led to surrender all his personal preferences, um, all the choices that he would make, and just go with whatever came to him. So whatever the flow of life brought to him, he went with it. And it took him on some really strange adventures. Like he had this property and people just started showing up on the property and camping out. And so he realized, oh, the universe is inviting this to be a retreat. So he created like this yoga retreat, and somehow he got involved in computers and ended up being a CEO. And this was a guy who had wanted nothing more. If it was his own choice, his choice would have been to basically retreat into a cave and meditate and do yoga all day long. So he gave that up to do what life was bringing to him. And now I'm not sure exactly why this moved me so, other than I thought, yes, I am. Okay, when I go back, I was living in that time of trying to control and make my life go a certain way. And instead, I love this idea of what if I could let life happen through me? And so over the years, I have done this more and more. It was not an overnight thing, but it was more of a question of what is surrender? And it seemed to me to have everything to do with acceptance. Like that is how we surrender. And the way it looks through me is not like it did for Michael Singer. I don't feel drawn to give up all notion of preference. In fact, I think that what I'm creating is not something that the universe imposes on me, but something that I create with and as the universe, right? That blows my mind if I sit with that for longer than for however long it blows my mind. Um, but it's through that acceptance. That's what surrender is like. Stop trying to control. That is the surrender that lets us fall into that place of acceptance. And from that place, we can sense what's happening, what's naturally moving. It's a different way of living. Instead of setting goals, it's aligning with a flow. Instead of trying to make things look a certain way, it doesn't mean that I don't choose a direction to go in. I absolutely do, but it's also being sensitive to the tiny changes and open to, oh, make a right-hand turn here. Oh, no, go left now to get me there. And being open to how that appears and being open to all the miracles and the magic that can happen from that place. So again, this is why I love acceptance so much, because it seems to me the doorway to joyful creation. It's like which also is our natural state. It's everything is about coming back to the moment where we're happening, the moment where this is happening now, where you have the experience of that fullness, of that kingdom of yourself, the lotus, the sacred space that you are, and then all that flows through that. And did that answer your question, David? Because I went on a bit of a ramble there.
Oh God, it's great. It's great. I love rambles. Rambles are, my middle name is Rambo. I mean Ramble. No, that's actually quite a beautiful thing. And one of the things that you said, the way I heard it, it sounded like for you, surrender and acceptance really are just two aspects of the same thing. And I think that's a very interesting insight, something that I hadn't quite thought of before. The other thing that you talked a lot about was this whole concept of control. And I think that in truth, control is part of the domain of the ego mind. I don't really believe the soul has any need for control. It just simply doesn't. The soul knows itself to be totally free and open to expression and all the rest of it. It's only the ego mind who is constantly in a state of fear, constantly trying to keep us safe, is trying to control all circumstances so that that safety is maintained. And that's where control comes in. So I think in a real sense, surrender is the soul and control, our ego, is control. So you've got these two forces which need to find a way to coexist. And that's really what we're talking about here. So if I can surrender, what I'm essentially doing, I think, is allowing my ego mind to go quiet so that I can become fully present to what is, and then allow me to be in that flow of acceptance. So that's how I see it all unfolding. And so I don't know if that resonates for you or not, but you can answer that and also at the same time help us to move towards maybe a 3 or 4 step process for cultivating a state of acceptance.
You're asking me to create a process on the spot, David.
Right on the spot, because I know how wildly creative you are.
Let's see what happens. Okay, so first, yes, and so when we are balancing on a balance beam, we have this we talk about life balance, or balancing these two things like our mind and our soul, right? So the actual thing that happens in the process of walking on a balance beam is that we are constantly out of balance coming back to the beam. So we're constantly correct, like we're off balance coming back, off balance coming back. Right. Now, like it says, as if sometimes when we think about that, we think about balance is the ideal and being off is not, but we couldn't have balance without being off balance. And so this idea of control and surrender, or control and acceptance, it's more like balancing in that we're not just going to ever have one or the other. It's kind of going to always be like, it's bringing us back to center, bringing us back to center. And so it's part of the natural flow of things. It seems to me, in my experience, that I will have these times when I want to control, and I will have these times where I'm experiencing surrender. And sometimes I'll have them at the same time, which is really buggy. And that's also okay. And this is how we find that state of acceptance that is what is actually happening, if that makes sense.
No, I love it. And in fact, another analogy that I've heard of that's very similar to this one is if you imagine an airplane taking off from Los Angeles and flying to New York. Really, there's a straight line you can draw between Los Angeles and New York that the airplane tries to fly on. But the fact of the matter is that airplane has to make corrections 100% of the time because it is off course 100% of the time. Yes. And yet somehow, magically, it ends up where it was supposed to be going. And that's the same thing with your balance beam idea. I like that. It's a beautiful metaphor. And, and yes, of course, we're constantly shifting in order to stay aligned with our true our true purpose, if you like, our true essence of who we are, which is all part of the whole acceptance process. Now, go ahead with your 4-step process.
4 steps. Let's see.
However many.
Yeah. I think that the first thing to do would be to begin with noticing, ask yourself, when am I accepting? When am I not accepting? That's probably like the first step, is to get an awareness of, if I was going to have a first step,
Yeah.
to ask that question. What is acceptance to me? When am I in acceptance? When am I not in acceptance? This is not like a question you get right or wrong. It's something you live into. So you might be like, oh, you could think of specific people. Who or what am I accepting? Then pick somebody who it's easy for you to say, I accept this. And then what am I not accepting? And what's that experience? And notice what you notice, right? That's the first thing.
Notice.
And then, notice really about these things. The second thing I would say is just notice maybe where there's some tension for you around it. So does it seem like how does it affect you when you are in acceptance versus this state we're calling non-acceptance or resistance? So what do you notice about that? That could be a second kind of like piece of the noticing, right? Noticing, how does it affect your behavior? And then you can kind of go, what if I was a little more accepting? Does that seem like it would be a useful thing to do? And explore that a little bit and notice how that feels, and notice what thoughts come up around it, and notice like, if you've ever done the work with Byron Katie, there's this beautiful process where she asks things like, who would I be without that thought? Who would I be without this resistance? And sometimes the answer is, I just genuinely don't know, because I've never been without it, or it seems like I've never been without it. I bet you have. So like, just notice that. This is the beautiful thing, that when we're open and curious, that's what I would suggest, is just to get curious about it and see what happens. See what happens with it. And then you may like to ask some of those questions if it occurs to you. What if I accepted this? What do I love about this? What's funny about this? So it's kind of like noticing. I would say noticing, kind of. Yeah, I don't know if there's a second step in there. Is there? Is there noticing something? And then
this is beautiful. This is beautiful. Really. I asked for a 4-step process, and you gave it to me. I would have probably come up with the same steps, although maybe not in exactly the same way. But basically, you start by noticing where you are right now in relationship to acceptance. Second, you notice how you are in terms of, how do you feel about that relationship? Then you start asking these questions, like the Byron Katie question. What would you be without this? And by the way, I've played with Byron Katie's process, and often when I get an I don't know, I know the next question is, well, what do you think you would say if you did know? I don't even say I don't know anymore. If I don't really know, I make something up on the spot, because usually, even if it's completely fabricated, it's pretty close to the truth. So that's been my experience. And then finally, now you can start playing with, what would it be like to find the funny aspect of this, find the part that I love about this, to find the benefits of this, so that I can be more open to accepting it. Mm. See, look at that. 4-step process for surrendering into acceptance.
Can we make that a proprietary process? Can we package
Absolutely. You own it. It's yours 100%.
Oh no, you just articulated that so beautifully. I want to share that with you.
Well, thank you. But I mean, you and I do both the same thing. We work with people.
Oh, it's exactly.
And we did not have a plan for this, by the way. I want everybody on this show to know this. We did not have a plan for this. It was not part of our script. It was something that just came because it was guided by spirit. So, well, Stephanie, I mean, I've been having such a great time talking to you here, and I'm sorry to say we are actually near the end of our time, and so I wanted to know if there's anything else you'd like to say to me or to the audience before I close out the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you, David, for leading these. That's really what comes to mind. Thank you for creating this space and leading this discussion around these topics, for inviting me to be here, for entertaining with curiosity and looking for something new and asking great questions. And for you listening and attending to this, thank you for doing that. And for whatever you're willing to see. I mean, I think everything comes down to willingness. It opens the door for any change, every change. It opens the door for infinite possibilities. Just the willingness to notice something new, the willingness to notice that is new. You
Right.
know, what's happening in the moment. So I'm very grateful for that. And anyone and everyone who participates in that in any way, because you're making the world even more amazing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. It's always a pleasure to share space with you, as I said before. And thank you to all of you for watching today or for watching the recording, whatever it is you're doing. And just for those of you who may not know, the recordings are all available on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. Some people prefer to say life-mastery-tv.com, but you'll figure out how to get there. I truly hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I'd just like to remind you, in a few hours, you're going to receive an email with a link to a feedback page. It really is helpful to me and to other people who might be considering watching this show to see feedback from people like you who have already participated. So if you can find your way to write an authentic, from the heart, beautiful 5-star review, that would be awesome, because that helps us in a great way. And finally, my friends, I just want to remind you to practice the Life Mastery mantra every day. It goes like this: I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. Bye-bye for now.